Hello, welcome to my Facebook Live channel. I'm Dr. John Cruz, and today I'm talking about test versus task framing. I know that might not mean much to any of you, but hopefully by the end of this 15 or 20 minutes it will. And for many of my patients, it's actually been the most life-changing thing I've taught them. So if you don't catch this live, it will be here on my Facebook page for the next several weeks. And if you haven't seen the previous Facebook Lives, the first one was focused on working from home during this shelter in place with the coronavirus. It's particularly tips for people with ADHD. The second one was about scheduling and the importance of scheduling and how to do it. Again, it's oriented towards people with ADHD, but useful for pretty much everybody. The third one was the struggle with bedtimes and strategies for dealing with that. And then the last week's was on procrastination. So I'm going to enter into today's talk by session after session. I'll be listening to a patient and they'll be talking about something they were doing, and then they realized they were trying to file their taxes and then realized they had left out the receipts in some other area and couldn't do what they were trying to do, and then suddenly felt like a failure and felt like they couldn't accomplish anything, and then it spiraled into, I'm a horrible person who's completely ineffective and always scrambling and screwed up. And to me, some of the linchpin there is the framing of what they did as a failure is a direct result of our casting so many things in life as a test, because if it's not a test, then you can't have failed. If it's just a task, then you may be blocked, you may be stymied, you may be prevented, but you're not failing at it. So I'm going to be explaining that today. So a little bit more, why do people with ADHD so often find themselves in this situation? Again, it's not only people with ADHD, but we know that there are propensities in the brains of people with ADHD. It doesn't force them to make mistakes, but it makes them much more prone or likely to leave out details, to forget to do things, to not give themselves enough time to do a task, to not have done the preparation or the homework ahead of time, so they're not prepared or ready. And also the aspects of impulsivity that add to mistake making. If you sort of speak before you think, or you jump into a situation, or you volunteer for a situation you're not prepared or ready for, then you're more prone to make mistakes. But all of us make mistakes, and not all of us sort of blow it into a huge out of proportion issue. So one other crucial aspect that often goes on in ADHD is what we call emotional dysregulation. So up to 65% of people with ADHD in a recent study were found to have elements or strong aspects of emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is not part of the official criteria for ADHD. So the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, for years and multiple revisions has emphasized sort of the academic or cognitive problems with ADHD, the distractibility, the getting off track, the making careless mistakes, the blurting out comments quickly, being impatient, not waiting for others. So they've highlighted the impulsivity, the hyperactivity, the inattentiveness, but particularly for those people with hyperactive forms of ADHD, the vast majority, so studies in that subset of ADHD suggest that 85 to 90% of those people have problems with emotional dysregulation. And that is that emotions come up more quickly, come up bigger and stronger, and that it's harder until something else changes the emotional tenor to get that person out of that emotional state. So this is a problem of some of the executive functions of the brain, the parts of the brain that control and regulate. So it's not that the emotions themselves are broken or wrong, it's that they are less rigidly regulated. So the analogy I often come up with is, in the attention realm, we often talk about people focusing on the tree that's in front of them and forgetting that they're in the midst of a big forest. And similarly, the parallel is in the emotional range. If you're getting so mad at that person who cut you off in traffic that's all you see is how stupid they are and you have to teach them a lesson, the emotional dysregulation sort of locks you into that area, and again, until something else comes up to distract you or pull you out of that. So you sort of forget, wait a minute, I'm driving a car, there's other cars on other sides around me. I shouldn't be just focusing on that one person that's made me that angry or upset. So again, although with ADHD, there are biological factors that are both making people more prone to making mistakes and more prone to having emotional dysregulation play a role in sort of blowing up or expanding the emotions. This is clearly a situation pretty much like everything in the brain. This is not just biology and not just your nature. There are aspects of nurture or parenting or how you grew up or socialization and training involved. And that's particularly, again, where this concept of failure comes in. Many kids who grew up with ADHD, with critical parents or teachers or other adults around them, or even other kids, learned that they were constantly being evaluated and told that they were doing wrong. And again, that evaluation is framing things as a test. So the socialization for this in certainly our American culture, I mean, strongly comes from the educational system. So much of our educational system is viewing every step along the way, even viewing it as steps along the way, is viewing it as a series of tests. You're going to pass this test in math. You're going to get an A in calculus. You're going to pass third grade and be able to go to fourth grade. You're going to get test scores good enough to go to an Ivy League school. Everything we emphasize so much is on a test and whether you've passed or failed it and whether you get to go on to the next stage. But it's not just our academic settings that do this. Our whole world of sports, again, much of when we talk about it, we're focusing on who won that game, who won last year's Super Bowl, who won the World Cup game. And, if you came in second, you're not the second best team in all of soccer, football, whatever the sport is. You're sort of considered a loser, at least at a superficial level that we often discuss things. And in politics, we do the same thing. It's, is Donald Trump ahead in Florida right now? Is Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate pick going to boost him in Michigan or in Nevada or something like that? So we're focused on winning or, failing and simplifying things into a test situation, when in actuality, all these situations are much more nuanced, much more, in reality, experienced as a task. So in school, yes, I'm not saying grades don't matter, but I'd say at a fundamental level, it's what you learn and how you learn to employ that later in life that's important. In the sports situation, if you are an aficionado of soccer games, you're actually probably really remembering the beautiful plays or the wonderful kicks or the missed goals, rather than just, remembering that France won the World Cup 2 years ago. And similarly, in politics, I would argue it's not who won the elections, it's actually what they do once they're in power that matters. But again, so much of our dialogue, so much of our framing is focused on this test framework rather than task framework. So I'm going to say a little bit more about why I see this as so sort of poisonous at a social and individual level and bad. So one, if you're defining things as a test, right away you are conceding control to others. Someone else has actually decided what's good or bad. Someone else has already decided getting an A in math is a good thing, or finishing grade school and going on to middle school is a measure of success. Whereas in real life, particularly among adults, so some of my talk may not be that appropriate to kids because they don't get to decide things. But this is your life. You get to decide what you want to be doing. You can sort of accept that people around you are putting tests in front of you. But if that doesn't match what you're trying to accomplish, what you want to achieve, where you're going in life, you don't have to accept their tests. So again, first of all, tests are exerting someone else's control over what they think you should be doing. And then more importantly, not only are they framing what you should be doing, they are telling you whether you did it well enough or not. They are defining the criteria for what is success. And again, this is your life. There's not going to be a score sheet at the end, looking at, did you pass geometry in third grade? Did you get a B in sociology in your college final exam? Your life and whether you achieved what you wanted, whether you did what you wanted, is your own task to decide what you did and whether you did it to your satisfaction. So again, the test framework, is the one that decides whether you failed or not. And I would argue, if you use a task framework, until the point that you're dead, there's almost no task you can fail at. You can be blocked, you can be stymied. I mean, if you're trying to so a task versus test distinction is my daughters are applying to, in early stages of applying to colleges. They're finishing their junior year of high school, and so many people define success as getting into a good school. But if you define your task as, I want to go to a place where I'm going to learn something and I'm going to develop lifelong friends, that one, again, you may be blocked at, you may not be finding it at a certain school, then you can go somewhere else, or you can change your social skills, or change who you're hanging out with, or define it differently. But again, accepting someone else's criteria that you failed because you didn't get into school X, Y, or Z is setting you up for feeling negatively about yourself, So some other bad things about the test versus a task framing. With the test, the other bad things are, once the test is over, it's done, it's sealed, it's a finished case. You can't go back and relitigate, the 2000 elections, or the who won the Super Bowl. That's on or whether you passed, your class, or whether you got an A or B or C in it. That's final. That's the end of it. So if it was, quote, a failure, you are always going to have a failure on your record. On the other hand, if you've been viewing it as a task, you haven't failed. Again, you've been blocked in it, you've been prevented from achieving it. But the game isn't over. And again, until you are dead, you can keep trying, you can keep figuring out how you want to reapproach this problem. And that gets into the next, maybe the fourth difference between a test versus a task. With a test, once you finished it, again, maybe you passed, maybe you failed, you got a grade, it's over, it's done. So what do you do next? It doesn't leave you with any direction to go or what to do. With a task, if you're always trying to achieve something, again, whether you're blocked at a certain time or whether you have achieved some level of success or maybe completed that task, almost always that task, going back to figuring out, what was I trying to accomplish here? Again, if you're blocked, if you're thwarted, if you're not accomplishing it yet, reframing it, looking back at what you were trying to do, will tell you what the next steps are, or hopefully will lead you on to what is your next task for yourself. So again, this is something useful. It's useful in the moment when someone, again, to the sort of anecdote I began with, that if someone is figuring out their taxes and realizes they don't have everything there, and then feels like, oh my God, I'm a failure, I can't do this, I did this wrong. If you view this as a task, the task is, okay, so I didn't prepare well enough, I didn't have this, what am I trying to do now? If my task is to complete the taxes, that's okay. I need to go back and find those receipts from that year, or whatever it is. So again, what that helps you achieve is that it doesn't give you a global sense that I failed at everything. Again, I would argue there's very few tasks you can fail at if you really framed it as a task. What else can I say about it? So one interesting thing, I've had taught this approach to people, and very often they'll come in and they'll say, I was doing it pretty well, but then I forgot to do it, and they'll describe some situation that was overwhelming and they felt they didn't do well at, and then they've compounded it, that they've not only failed at that individual task, they've failed at the task, but of course they're framing as a test of using task versus test in that situation. So again, life will keep giving you hundreds of opportunities to employ this approach. You can't fail at using task versus test. You may be blocked, you may be stymied, you may not be doing it consistently as much as you want. But the good thing is, as soon as you're aware of framing something as a test versus a task, you're allowed to go back and reframe it, recast it as a task. So that is about all I have to say directly. I'm certainly open to questions right now if I wasn't clear or didn't emphasize things, or if there's implications or qualifications of this you'd like to check in on. So I'll be humming silently to myself the Jeopardy melody for the next minute, and then if nobody has any questions, I will be back next week, and I am working out what the topic next week will be. But right now I am open to further questions. Okay, it looks like I either explained things so clearly. Yay, I passed my test. Again, it's not, I'm trying to convey information to you. If I haven't succeeded in this video, there will be more chances with redoing it or writing it or explaining it in other ways, or maybe finding someone else who can explain it better. But thanks for paying attention today, and take care of your health, and physical and mental. And even if your state or country or county is allowing less restrictive social interactions, make sure you're doing what you need to do to protect yourself and hopefully protect those around you. So that's all for today. I'll be ending the live video again. And if you have questions later, it's fine to either send them to me directly on Facebook or putting comments on this particular post. That's all for today.